Hello, everyone. My name is Mariachiara Carestia. I'm a member of the Directive and Didactic Board of the International Master Courses in Protection Against CBRNE Events. I am a cell and molecular biologist as a background, but I also completed my PhD at the Industrial Engineering Department, and the subject of my PhD was the development of optical techniques for biological agents detection. Since 2013, I have also been involved in several European-funded projects on CBRN, and today I'm going to talk about the MELODY project. The acronym MELODY is for a harmonized CBRN training curriculum for first responders and medical staff. So this is just to give you an overview that you may have already seen from previous presentations on the EU grants on CBRN in which the master courses have been involved. And as you can see, we started in 2013 with the previous project I was involved in, that is CBRN Integrated Response Italy. And by the end of this presentation, you will have some references about this project because I think that it can be useful for you as master students as well. And then different projects have been funded during those years. eNOTICE is still ongoing, and I'm sure that my colleague, Daniele Di Giovanni, will give you a presentation on that. And MELODY started in 2018. After that, we also won 3 more EU projects specifically devoted to critical infrastructures and protection against CBRNE events. Overall, all these projects are allowing us to be involved and to sustain a community of users on disaster management on CBRNE. It is a great, unique opportunity to increase the network, and many of these projects were born because of previous projects that we were involved in. And this is also a unique opportunity to work in close cooperation with end users and with stakeholders at all levels. The MELODY project and the MELODY Consortium is a consortium of research institutions and of end users. As you can see, we have here the coordinator, that is the Belgian Center for Radiological and Nuclear Matters, and then we have the Netherlands, represented by their own health institute. Then we have Italy, and is represented by our master courses. Another university from Sweden, and we have all these centers here in Slovakia, in Belgium, in Hungary, in Poland and Finland, where we have end users that are involved in the project as well. The project is divided in 7 work packages, and work package number 1, as all the projects are mainly, is about management and coordination of the entire project. Then work package number 2, that is the inventory of training curricula, practitioner needs and gap analysis, and is what I'm going to show you more in detail later on. Work package number 3 about the development, the actual development of the harmonized curriculum. The work package number 4 about deployment of the harmonized curriculum, and by deployment we mean that the pieces of the curriculum will be actually deployed in one of the training centers that I mentioned before, and by an iterative process the curriculum will be strengthened, so gaps will be analyzed, and everything that is not working well will be fixed. And this is the objective of work package number 5. Then we have the final, let's say, exercise using the harmonized curriculum, and this work package is dedicated to present, test, and evaluate the harmonized CBRN first responders training curriculum. And finally, as all the projects are structured, we have the dissemination and demonstration work package taking care of all the dissemination aspects. About the rationale of the MELODY project, MELODY will and actually has already and is already consulting and identifying existing training curricula, materials, and other facilities inside and outside the consortium that can have suitable material and methodologies for the objective of the project. Based on the output collected during the first phases of the project, an initial curriculum will be developed, and this curriculum was thought to be modular, and I will explain you later on what do we mean by modular, including different levels of knowledge and intensity to match the first responders training needs. You will also see that we had to clearly identify who the first responders were, because different projects may have different understanding for the definition of first responders. Then the efforts that will be spent in improving the training material will basically be tested and deployed during the project. And it is very important that the CBRN training curriculum will be assessed and evaluated. So the exercises and training activities will support us in improving the curriculum. And we hope that by the end of the project, that will be in 2021, we will demonstrate a final version of the curriculum that will be basically ready to use by the first responders organizations. So what is the actual scope of the MELODY project? You see here in this slide different phases of a CBRN event. So we have threat assessment, we have prevention, we have the initial response, the coordinated response where specialistic teams are in place, and then we have the recovery phase. For the purpose of MELODY, the initial response is the actual scope. So we are not considering prevention, although training of first responders will be a measure also to increase prevention. And we are not considering the coordinated response with specialistic teams, although what we are doing here is trying to train first responders in order to improve the quality of the response by the specialistic teams. So about the workflow for the identification of the user's training needs. The training needs of the first responders in this project were collected through a very active way, so through interviews and national and international workshops, using a task-based approach, and I will show you later on what do we mean by task-based approach, because I think that could be useful for other activities that you may encounter in your work. Then, based on the various tasks that need to be performed during a CBRN incident, and these tasks are called operational functions. So in combination with the definition of the first responders that the MELODY project gave, it was possible to identify precisely the target audience of the MELODY training curriculum. These target audiences consist of all the responders that arrive first at an incident scene. So firefighters, law enforcement agencies, healthcare personnel, paramedics, whatsoever, but also those personnel like emergency medical personnel and general practitioners that are in the hospital facilities, for instance, as you see here, that might be involved at other locations rather than the location of the accident, but with contaminated patients that are transported. And finally, it took a bit of discussion within the consortium of MELODY, but we also consider dispatched officers as part of the first responders family, as they are one of the first involved getting the emergency calls. So they can play a key role when in the initial phase of risk assessment. So here you can see what do we mean by operational functions. We, as a general approach in the MELODY project, we had to take advantage of all that's been done in previous European projects. This is somehow mandatory from the European Commission when it grants you. So when you are awarded by a grant, one of the main point is that you should, as maximum as possible, make use of what other previous projects have made available. So no one wants a European project to reinvent the wheel, because lots of the work has already been done. So difficult may be to find the suitable material. But from the initial idea of the MELODY project, our aim was to use as much material as possible from previous project, and that has been done in the first instance for the operational functions. So for another project that is called Practice, and you have a reference here if you are interested into looking more in detail in how these operational functions have been identified and for which other scopes. But we have decided which operational functions were more suitable for our first responders, and we, you see in italics, we also added some more specification to the operational functions. So for instance, you see here first alert, which means to be able to collect an initial alarm. So an alarm which announces an incident or a serious threat, and so on and so forth. Initial reconnaissance, so determine the scale of the incident, the propagation time, and to appropriate securing the zones and so on. Avoid cross-contamination was something that we included in the MELODY project definition of the operational functions. And I'm not going to read through all of these operational functions, but I just wanted to give you the taste of what they are. So the approach was basing on these operational functions that are the operational functions supposed to be in the initial phase, as I showed you before. We defined by surveying different first responders in different EU countries represented by the member states in the consortium. We tried to identify for the different countries, and so by the end of having an overall view, which kind of first responder was involved in which kind of operational function. As you see here, dispatch officers are involved in first alert, are involved for what concern having a CBRN harmonized terminology. So if they learn how the proper CBRN terminology, they will ensure that the work of the first responders and specialized teams afterwards is easier. So you see here firefighters, law enforcement agencies, ambulance personnel, emergency medical personnel, general practitioners, and dispatch officer. What's more, we wanted to know, according to the practitioners, which were their needs in terms of training. So we developed a questionnaire, and we conducted interviews with different practitioners, again in different member states, and so we used every means we had. So we phone called them. We had an international workshop last year, and using the task-based approach that I showed you before, we interviewed our practitioners. So we collect general information on their position, operational function, and some of their background on CBRN. And then we went on with specific questions, especially concerning CBRN training and CBRN incident involvement in general. So as I told you, the training needs were collected in different countries using standardized interview templates, and we focused on the desired content as well as available time for training and desired format of the training, because time is another huge constraint. You are lucky now because you are attending a full master course in protection against CBRN events, but you have to think about all the first responders on the field that will never have the chance to have such kind of training. So we have to do what we can with what we have. So sometimes the only time available for additional training for first responders is like a couple of days per year. So we needed to know how much time those first responders were able to spend on a CBRN training. And then, of course, another relevant thing is the format of the training, because as you know, training means frontal lessons, it means e-learning, it means some practical activities, and depending on the type of first responder and the type of learning objective you want to reach, there can be one or more format that works better, especially when you don't have that much time. As you see here, the questionnaire was split in two. So if the interviewee was able to answer yes at question T1, which is, do you or your personnel receive CBRN training? Then we were able to go through these other questions concerning the training itself. So about the specific subject of the training, the division of the training, was it a single course, multiple course, how many hours or days the training was, and including also the study load, which is another important thing. The entry level and the prerequisites for participation is another key aspect, and other information about the training. Otherwise, if no training was performed, another set of questions were asked to the interviewees. So assuming, of course, that they are in a position to answer and to identify the gaps. So as you see here, as many of the CBRN master students are already working as first responders or first responders trainers, and they were able to participate to the questionnaire and provided relevant information for Italy. So this is basically what happened after we ended reviewing all the questionnaires and the answers by the different first responders from different member states. And the overall structure of the MELODY curriculum was here on, and is here displayed in this way that I'm going to explain you a little bit more in detail now. So basically, we identified some topics that were necessary and were general for all the different first responders identified. So starting from the bottom, we have CBRN terminology that must be, of course, a common terminology for all those first responders. Speaking the same language, it's extremely important, and it's even more relevant when speaking about CBRN, because there are lots of threats for what concern misinterpretation or usage of the same word to describe different things. So one approach was to start from the European CBRN glossary, which is an attempt of the European Commission to have a glossary of words describing CBRN events. And after that, basic CBRN awareness was necessary to all the different responders. So be able to know that there are different types of agents, which kind of agents they are, the effects, and so on and so forth. Then this is quite fun, but we had a scientific approach to this project, as always is. So we found out that many of the interviewed replied that CBRN history can be relevant to also to first responders. So given the time constraint, we decided to have this kind of topic as optional. So maybe it will be part of an optional e-learning material. Then there are some topics that cover partially the different first responders. For instance, general practitioners and emergency medical services will go through a deeper knowledge of risk assessment at healthcare facilities, while dispatch officer will learn more about risk assessment and positioning, and the other first responders on the spot will learn more about risk assessment on scene and hazard avoidance, because of course they are the most exposed. You see here that for each different task, we also have task-specific response, which means that specific material designed on the different first responders will be delivered. And finally, we have another cross-cutting topic that is response awareness at the incident scene, improve interagency cooperation, because one of the main thing about MELODY is that when we speak about harmonization, we also speak about smoothing the cooperation between all the different actors, which means that a better response to a CBRN event will occur. Now I'm going to tell you more about what's working and what's not working, or better said, what can be difficult to achieve in this kind of project. So alongside with the training needs stated by the first responders and identified, we also conducted a survey to find out about existing CBRN training material in different member states. And we identified the scope of these trainings, the target audience, the language, the availability for reuse of the material. And what we have found out is that although there is lots of things going on between the different member states, so there is a training going on and there is lots of material, most of the material is in the native language, and besides that, the availability is not always granted. So most of the times you have wonderful training material that could be reused, but it's not possible just to take it and integrate it into a unique harmonized curriculum because of intellectual property issues or confidentiality of the material. So when you plan to to harmonize a curriculum and to use what's available, things get complicated. The main gaps that have been found between first responder training needs and existing training material, so is that, as I anticipated, there is lots of training materials, but they are not available to the MELODY project. The target audiences of the collected CBRN training usually are more focused on specialized teams, specialized CBRN teams, and this makes things even more complicated because you are assuming that the background and the baseline is higher. So you have to simplify things, and you may know that sometimes making things easier is one of the most complicated things. Then most of the CBRN training components consist of PowerPoint presentations and tabletop exercises. And as you know, both these learning tools tend to be quite time-consuming. Then, in general, the material is not very richly illustrated, and the content is mostly text-based. And the PowerPoint should be extended with motivated learning approaches. So, and this is something that I'm going to show you later on. Not always the material is clear and has a complete narrative. So it is not easy to use that material. Other learning formats that we were eagerly looking for, like e-learning or serious gaming, were not found in the database. So we were not able to find material that could be used. And one of the most annoying things was that it was not clearly described how much time was needed to conduct that CBRN training component. Finally, the level of the trainer expertise that was needed to perform the training was not clearly defined for all the CBRN training components. So the point is, if I have to develop a curriculum that and training material that is basically standalone, that I can deliver to a first responder organization so that they can use it for their target audience, I have to state which is the level of expertise that the trainer in that facility, for instance, must have in order to teach to the students, to the trainees, the material. So by doing this gap analysis, we were able to identify a prerequisite to fill the gaps that were use the available CBRN training components to develop an attractive and motivating training solution, develop not yet existing CBRN training components, and providing task-specific CBRN training components, and also collaborating between first responders in CBRN incidents. Develop a CBRN training framework that is flexible in time, and select a training format that meets the needs of the target audience. So for sure, the dispatch officer needs to know the general terminology, needs to know maybe something more about interagency cooperations, but it is not needed if we don't have the time for a complete training for him to know a lot about zoning, for instance. Another important thing is that sometimes the CBRN training material is developed by really experienced personnel that design the training according to its own experience and expertise, and this is one thing that surely works, but it makes everything really fragmented, and it makes it really country specific, and it makes it sometimes really specific for the specific organization. So if we are looking to have a product of the MELODY project that can be really took from different organizations, we need to be more scientific as possible. So to do so, we used the Bloom's revised taxonomy model to start developing our curriculum. So the Bloom's taxonomy is a general classification of the objectives and skills that educators set for their students, and these are basically called the learning objectives. So you see that there are two dimensions here. So the first one is the knowledge dimension, and the second one is the cognitive process dimension. So by crossing these two dimensions concerning factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive aspects, and remember, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create, which are the steps of the cognitive process, you can come up with a set of verbs that describe what the learning objective is. So here you see examples of this. For instance, remember plus factual can be translated into list primary and secondary colors. That can also be, in the case of CBRN, list chemical and biological agents, let's say. And the more we go on the right and the more we go towards the bottom, the more the process is complex and complete. So back to our modular approach with the Bloom's taxonomy in mind. Here, I am going to show you the product of MELODY as it is right now. So we are in the middle of the project at the moment, and you cannot see what's written in the Excel file exactly. So for simplifying things, I described what's in this column here on the left. So you see that basically we have the topics, and here the topics are about terminology. Here the topics are about awareness. Here we have the extras. So for instance, history of CBRN. We have first alert here, risk assessment on sin and hazard avoidance, risk assessment and the healthcare facilities, task-specific topics. In the columns, we have the topics. We have developed the content of the training, and we have defined the learning objectives. So what a trainee should be able to do after receiving the training. We have listed here the different tasks and marked who has to have access to the different topics. We have included the time that we assume should be spent on each topic. And we have, yes, here we have a list of remarks, especially for the activities that we thought should be complemented by practical training or other things like that, or for instance, where e-learning was more suitable rather than frontal lessons, and so on and so forth. Finding the good balance between theoretical and practical training is quite hard. So we have all these tools that we can use. We have e-learning, we have frontal lessons, we have video tutorials that are quite useful, especially when you have restricted time. We have practical training, because when you have, for instance, to practice how to wear a mask or using the gloves, practical training is more effective. We all know that. Then we have scenario discussion exercises, tabletop exercises, and all those tools can be used, but we still need to find the good combination. We already provided in the MELODY project first approach on this. So we have selected which topic will need scenario discussion exercises or video tutorials or what can be done through e-learning. We are also making it easy for the first responders agencies to take the material in English and to use it once they have translated into their own languages. But this is something that is going on in the project, so the clear methodology is not that yet. And just to show you what one of the tools looks like, we have an example of scenario discussion exercise. Theoretically, a scenario discussion exercise should come at the end of a short training. And here, for instance, we have a short description of a methodology that is called the methane methodology. That is a protocol, basically, to apply to major incidents and to CBRN incident in particular. So the M stands for major incident. So basically, all of these items here are basically a question that the first responder should ask himself in case of an incident. So about the scale of the incident, so what happened, how big the incident looks like, the exact location, so so the accurate description of the location, the T stands for type of incident, so was it an explosion or a building that is collapsed, a traffic incident, and so on and so forth. Hazards, so what kind of CBRN hazard is present or could occur. A stands for access, so to what extent and how is the area accessible. N stands for number of casualties, so being able to estimate the number and type of casualties if there are some. And E stands for emergency services, so the first thing to think about is what services are already present and who is needed. So after a short introduction on the methane methodology and protocol, we assume that the trainees will go through this scenario discussion exercise. So they will have some key facts, nothing too detailed. This is not a tabletop exercise. This is just an exercise that lasts 10 to 15 minutes. And these informations are just to give the flavor of the situation. That, in fact, is what the first responders will be in contact with, because they will arrive first on the scene, and they will have sometimes just few items to work with to define the scene. So here, for instance, you see the key facts reporting reporting about people calling the emergency services because of a strange smell from an apartment of a block of flats. But when the emergency services arrive, they find that the front door of the apartment is open and the occupant standing by the door is having seizures. But the house is filled with what seems to be the equipment for drug production. And for instance, if you are from countries like our colleagues from the Netherlands report, where illegal drug production is quite a big thing, it is not that uncommon for a first responder to find an illegal improvised laboratory for drugs. However, you cannot exclude other types of threats. But at this time, as a trainee, you just don't know. But this is the point where it's correct for you to ask yourself the right questions. So here, just to add more flavor to the exercise, we provide some very basic images that should help the trainees to get into the scene with a very easy tool. And afterwards, we have a set of questions that are for them not to answer, but to trigger them. So to allow them to start thinking of other possibilities rather than the improvised laboratory in apartment. And by the end, to help them applying the methane protocol. So as I told you before, MELODY is just half the way. We are now preparing all the material. We have a lot of, for instance, scenario discussion exercises, but we also are arranging the e-learning material, and we are creating all and reusing all that can be reused for creating the curriculum. And actually, we were already supposed to deliver the first part of the curriculum for the first exercise, but as you know, coronavirus didn't allow us to travel or to get into any of the facilities that should have participated to these activities, that is the International Security and Emergency Management Institute in Slovakia, Campus Vesta in Belgium, and the Rapid Response and Special Police Service in Hungary, the University of Lodz in Poland with the Polish police, and the Emergency Service Training Center Foundation in West Finland. So according to the coordinator, we will postpone our activities of few months because we cannot at the moment think about delivering this first curriculum and collecting all the feedbacks from the trainees in a remote way. So we absolutely need to go there and to deploy the curriculum. If we are lucky, we will do this by the end of August, or the beginning of September this year, starting with the Hungarian Rapid Response and Special Police Service. And by the end of the first round of curriculum deployment, I will be surely able to let you know more about MELODY. Now, as we have some time left, I want to show you just another project we were involved in, because still today, few of the outcomes, few of the output of these projects are really useful as material, learning material for CBRN. So back in 2013, we as University of Rome Tor Vergata were involved in a new project called CBRN Integrated Response Italy, about strengthening CBRN response in Europe by enhancing on-site cooperation between safety and security organizations, and it was an Italian pilot. Together with us, there was the coordinator, Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna, based in Pisa, and the Italian firefighters. We also had other associated partners representing other end users. And once again, the aim of the project was about harmonizing and smoothing cooperation between first responders. In this case, it was even more tricky, the situation, because the boundary condition was that cooperation was between first responders and law enforcement agencies, while a security CBRN incident was occurring. So with all the implications concerning the scene management and the responsibilities, because one thing is when you have a truck carrying some chemical substances and it has an accident, so there it's clear that it's an accident and first responders will be involved. But another pair of shoes is when you have a security incident. So if someone, for instance, puts an improvised dispersal device containing radioactive material in I don't know, in a sensitive critical infrastructure, then you will need first responders, because they are, for instance, in Italy, they are the ones who are responsible for securing a CBRN scenario. But you absolutely need to work in close cooperation with law enforcement agencies that guarantee security and also preserve the scene. So the objectives in a nutshell were to identify differences between national operational response frameworks of law enforcement and firefighters to CBRN security incidents, to define common approaches to deal with critical issues. So building on the experience of EU countries such as Estonia and the Netherlands that were supporting the consortium, develop common guidelines for first response to national CBRN incidents and incoming assistance, because the project was also supporting the EU civil protection mechanism, and translate the guidelines into the outline of a common training curriculum for both first responders and law enforcement training institutes. So we first had the opportunity to create this mapping report that is a very useful tool that I will share with you together with this presentation. The report now is a bit outdated because it dates back to 2013. However, it is a huge report on 11 EU member states describing the legal and normative framework for the response to a CBRN incident. So I highly recommend you to have a look at this document because it's full of relevant information, and it also gives you the helicopter view of the different systems occurring in different EU member states. And if you are from a EU member state, but also if you are from abroad, you can start already from that document to perform a sort of gap analysis to identify which can be the main criticalities in case two or more countries have to work together in a CBRN environment, let's say. So it is really, really interesting for you to read. The project also included 2 tabletop exercises. One was held in Italy at the Comando Provinciale of the Firefighters in Pisa, and the other one was conducted in Estonia by the Academy of Security Sciences, where they also have a nice facility equipped for tabletop exercise at a high level of realism. And with the results of the tabletop exercises that were designed also according to the results of the mapping report, we were able to perform a gap analysis, and basing on that also to revise and propose to the European Commission some integration to the European Host Nation Support Guidelines for First Response, which are basically the guidelines that the EU Civil Protection Mechanism uses to harmonize the collaboration between different member states providing civil protection assistance that were basically lacking completely of reference to CBRN-E scenarios. And finally, we also proposed the outline of a common training curriculum specifically for first responders and law enforcement agencies. Unluckily for us, we didn't develop any training material. Otherwise, maybe we could have used it for MELODY now. However, the outline is still a nice document. Here, I'm just leaving you some references to other European projects on CBRN-E, but the main point of this slide is that you should not be afraid and scared about the amount of CBRN-related EU-funded projects. You should use all those projects and the material that is already still available on the website, because many deliverables of these projects are free for dissemination, so you can go and check, and sometimes you can find very interesting documents like the mapping report I showed you before, and a lot of other useful training material for CBRN specialists. So that concludes my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I am available for any further question you may have. But most of all, I really wish I can meet you in person very soon.